Welcome to Quality Time with MoreSteam. I am your host, Dan Swartout. On today's show, we're doing something just a little bit different, and I think really important. My guest today is Adelaido Godinez. He's a retired Army colonel with 31 years of service, who then went on to continuous improvement work in the private sector. Ad brings a rare mix of experience to the show, leading through combat and global crisis, navigating complex corporate environments, and then turning all of that into a thoughtful, deliberate approach to helping others get better. In our conversation, we just don't talk about lean tools and A3s. We get into what it means to lead when there are no easy answers, how to handle values mismatches, and the emotional weight that can come with this kind of work, and how to keep learning instead of pretending you've got it all figured out, because none of us do. Ad is generous with his stories and very candid about the parts of his journey that weren't neat or easy. Along the way, we tie everything back to themes you'll recognize from this show: respect for the individual, solving problems where the work happens, kata-style coaching, and building personal systems that make continuous improvement sustainable instead of exhausting. You'll walk away with ideas you can try right away: how to structure your day, how to choose problems people actually care about, and how to coach others by focusing on just the next step. Now, I'll be honest, this conversation stayed with me long after we stopped recording. It challenged me to rethink how I show up for other people, how I design my own routines, and how I say thank you to the people who've made a difference in my life. Ad quickly became one of my favorite guests we've had on the show, and I think you'll hear why. It's one of the most personal and insightful conversations we've had on the podcast, and yet it's still very much about operational excellence and about the kind of leadership that helps people and systems get better together. And now, my conversation with Ad Godinez. Welcome to the show, Ad. We're so glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Excited about it. And probably the most important thing was I'm really glad about the way we met.
Yes.
And that was a really good opportunity to see two people celebrating, an improvement, a change, and a new way of looking at leadership and change. So really glad about that.
I'm glad about that too. And you have one of the most fascinating backgrounds of anyone we've ever had on the show before. So I want to jump into all of that. But that's a good cliffhanger to talk about how fascinating your background is, because we'll get to that in a moment, because I did want to start off talking about how we met. Ad, you are recently through Ohio State, the Ohio State University's MBOE program, Masters of Business and Operational Excellence. And one of your coaches, your mentors throughout that program, was MoreSteam's own Ken Robinette.
That's right.
And on a winter morning here in MoreSteam HQ, they told us to gather around in the front area, and we weren't exactly sure why. And little did I know that I would have one of the coolest moments I've ever had here at the office by seeing your presentation to Ken. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think so. I have one here because it was presented to me in Afghanistan when I was chief of operations. My boss, who was very hard on me, and a Navy captain, they're a different class of officers. And he told the story about how there are special people in the world, and he was talking about captains who shine light on their problems. And I kept trying to figure out, how do I share the things that Ken did for me to his peers, because I've known Peg Pennington for nearly 4 years now. And I wanted him to be recognized for the way he changed the way I looked at the world. And so I was sitting in my office and I turned and I remembered the story in Afghanistan at ISAF when I was at the International Security Assistance Forces in Afghanistan as the chief of ops. And I thought, that's what Ken did for me. He was my light through this really difficult program, working through a problem one step at a time, not really worrying about where I was going, but just the next step. And that that kata approach of coaching was superb. And so I came out there to just talk about what he did for me and recognize him in front of our peers because, as you pointed out, I just was walking around and saying thank you to everybody. And you're like, thank you. That's what we should be doing. That's respect for every individual, the fundamentals of the Shingo principles. So foundational.
It was such a cool moment, and I really enjoyed chatting with you afterwards. And it stuck with me. Not often do you see that, because to do that kind of presentation to somebody, you have to admit, which not everyone is comfortable doing, that I needed help along the way. I needed guidance along the way. But everybody needs help and guidance because that's why we have coaches. That's why we have teachers. But one of the things that's hard for people to do is admit that I'm one of the people who needed help and guidance, even though we all need help and guidance. And for you to come out and do that, that was really, really cool. Did you ever have anything in your mind where you're like, okay, I'm kind of putting myself out there. I'm being a little vulnerable here. Did that ever come into play?
It's funny. No, not even once. I never had a question about my own vulnerability. My thought process is, you know, in a simple, bumper sticker. Tiger Woods has a coach. He is the best, right? He is the GOAT, right? Tom Brady has a coach. We all need someone to look outside from a different perspective. Uh, we have our 180 view of the world. Maybe some of us are lucky and get a 190 view of the world, and we have our blind spots, and those are natural. Our head is facing forward, and so every now and then we need a coach and someone to help you think through a problem or a problem set or a moment, or to remind you, hey, you're actually kind of smart, bud. You'll work it through this one. Here's the next step.
I don't know if you have been listening to any of the conversations I have with my daughter, because my daughter's an athlete, and I talk about coaches, and I bring up just what you brought up. I don't use Tiger Woods anymore. I use Scotty Scheffler, but it's the same principle. And Tom Brady, he's retired, so maybe I'd use, Sam Darnold just won the Super Bowl, so there you go. But I use that exact same thing because every single person needs coaching. But it almost goes back to some of these things we talk about, humility in being a leader and being a humble leader and admitting what you don't know as a leader. As a student, you also have to have that same humility and humbleness to say, well, I don't know this, and that's why I need coaching. And everybody needs coaching. Tiger Woods, Scotty Scheffler, Michael Jordan had a coach.
Exactly.
Oh, it was a really, really great moment. So thank you so much for that. It still sticks with me to this day because one of the things we talk about all the time, as we talked about that day, is the whole principle of respect for people, and it being one of the foundations of everything in lean thinking is respect for people. And you show that respect for people, and you came in such a way that really made me think in my mind, what can I do in my own life to show the people who've made an impact on me, to show them the difference they've made in my life? How can I do that more like Ad did it? It was awesome.
Well, thank you, sir. That's rewarding, and I'm really glad it resonated with you in particular. So thanks for sharing that. That's good, great feedback. I'll take that.
Cool. And now we're going to close the loop on that cliffhanger from earlier, because like I said, you do have one of the most fascinating backgrounds of anybody who's been a guest on the show. You spent 31 years in military service, including deployments to Iraq. You already mentioned Afghanistan, South Korea, Germany. What first drew you to operational excellence and process improvement during your military career?
I don't know that we had it as a term. at the time, but in the military. But it's always been a part of the process in operational excellence, and it was physical training. There was such a thing as a perfect score and going beyond the perfect score of a 300. And PT was the physical training and earning a 300, doing 91 push-ups in 2 minutes, doing 88 push-ups in 2 minutes, and running an 11:54 2 miles.
Whoa. Did you say 11:54, 2 miles?
2 miles.
Okay.
And so that, yeah, I was 18, right? So 18 to 28, that was the goal for that period of time that I pursued every time. And then when they changed the standard to meet our new world, my standard never changed. I was always trying to get 100 push-ups in 2 minutes, always trying to get 100 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and pursuing that 11:54, even though 100 points at that time was 13:02 for 2 miles. The pursuit of that 11:54 was my bar for excellence. And so I think that physical pursuit of excellence became a habit for me for a long period of time. And then I was selected for West Point. I had enlisted because a girl broke my heart. True story. Needed to get out of the town pretty fast, and ended up in Korea. Enjoyed the experience, and West Point, the Thayer method of teaching, where you go in and you're kind of quizzed immediately on what the assignment was. It's not a direct quiz, but you hit the boards and you're talking about the subject matter. You're not being taught. It's not rote recitation. It's synthesis and understanding. And so, this continuous improvement, operational excellence pursuit became a part of my lifestyle, even before I knew there was such a thing as operational excellence. That was the foundation.
Ad, you served as division chief on the Joint Staff, advising the chairman of the Joint Chiefs during the pandemic.
I did.
How did leading through that crisis shape your approach to problem solving under uncertainty?
I learned that there's not a straight path.
Okay.
We all are pursuing. It is natural for in our human nature to pursue a black and white, silver bullet approach to problem solving, right? And in the military, we're introduced to this concept of PMISI, political, military, economic, social. Can't remember what the two I's are: infrastructure and information. These are the dynamic, big systems, always in interaction, that you're trying to put into a certain stasis for a moment to understand how it works and figure out what part of the PMISI problem you're trying to put a finger on, solve, so you're not solving a symptom, but the root cause of what's creating that particular dilemma. And so what I learned is, first you have to build a shared understanding of the problem you're trying to understand before you can do anything else.
Right.
When you have 52, 54 different agencies in 32 different countries trying to solve the same problem, it's powerful. But if you have 32 different countries with each of them containing 54, 50, whatever organizations trying to solve different problems at the same time, you don't have a shared understanding of it, you're never going to get anywhere. Everybody's working against each other.
Right.
And so instead of creating a movement, the next step in a solution, what you're creating is more chaos in the system. And the system is already chaotic, right? If you're a systems thinker, you already know that every system we touch is dynamic, interdependent, and the moment you touch it and look at it, it changes.
What was it like when you're advising the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and it's February, March 2020? You have all of your experience, all that you have learned, all that you know about processes, but you're learning new information, having to make adjustments, not just daily, but on the hour. What was that like for you as an individual to be in that situation?
You know, to tell you the truth, there were elements of it that were reinforcing and good. The team that I built and the way that they could respond to the crisis and the way they worked as a team to solve one problem at a time, they learned that, and they really, we wrote great papers, we synthesized them. And if you've ever seen the chairman's advising a president or the chairman advising the Congress, he walks in with an A3 that has 120 different topics on it. And each topic is one bullet in a font 20 or a font 12. And it's one bullet. So it's one word or two words that he has to synthesize and be able to talk across the topic. The Western Hemisphere, which was what I was responsible for, was just one part of all of the topics that he had to think about. So trying to fit something into a bumper sticker that is as complex and dynamic as all that complex system that we were just talking about became a great life lesson. But it also helped. It made me internalize things that I really shouldn't have internalized. And it led me down some really dark moments in my life where I didn't feel like I was serving the president, our nation, or the chairman in the way that he deserved to be served. Not because of misses, but because I couldn't package the product that he needed in a way that was consumable and digestible, and made the changes that we needed to make within the national the national security construct, the NSC, the National Security Council, and across our partners. Right, we're talking 5 different languages across the Western Hemisphere, and so it's really difficult to communicate and develop the relations that you need to develop in this way across 33 nations in a COVID environment where you can't see people face to face. So I had to learn new techniques for building relationships, building trust, and engendering that what we're trying to build is a shared understanding so we can create a shared approach to a shared problem.
Looking back, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think you were a little hard on yourself at the time? And maybe you look back now and said, I actually did some pretty good work, but in that environment that was so pressure packed, maybe I was just too hard on myself at the time. And that's a problem a lot of people have.
I think you're very good at pulling this thread. And yeah, I was hard on myself. Probably more hard on myself than I needed to be. And I'm a better person for it. I'm a better coach for it. I'm a better mentor for it, because I can now see the outlines of when someone else is going through that. Mm-hmm. And I can say, man, I've been there. And I've been there in spades. And I screwed up here, here, and here. I can walk with you. And Brene Brown says, you got to create these boundaries. I'm going to jump in the hole for a little bit because I know how to get out.
You eventually leave the military. You transition to JP Morgan Chase as a process improvement manager. What surprised you the most about applying military leadership principles in a corporate environment?
I think, and I go back to this a lot. I get to talk to my peers about this and other officers and enlisted, because there is a different view of the world. If you're an enlisted soldier and an officer, a commissioned officer, you just see the world differently, and your responsibilities and your oath of office is different. As a commissioned officer retiring, I think the hardest part for me was the way the corporate institution in the middle management space weren't always aligned in values. Um, in the military framework, the framework that I grew up in, 99% of the time, our values were aligned. We were in absolute competition with each other, but it was a win-win competition. You know, uh, the best company commander in the entire division when I was company commander was my mentor, my best friend, and also someone I looked up to. And I wanted him to win, even though I wanted my company to win. And I would always move myself to support him. Chris Budahas would move himself into a position to support me. He gave up his best first sergeant to me because he saw that my company needed more than me as a leader. And so that ability to cross level talent in the corporate world isn't, you don't want to lose any of your talent, but you'll shed any talent that doesn't fit your agenda or what you're trying to accomplish. So that's one piece that values mismatch. The second piece is that in the corporate world, you don't take the team that you have and develop it. In the Army, you get whatever team you have and you create the environment to make the change you're trying to make. In the corporate, you look for people who fit whatever culture you're trying to set up. And so that, again, it's a very different approach, right? You're focused on building. I went to 33 different schools while I was in the Army. I had no idea until my retirement official said that. The current executive director that I'm coaching right now has been to 3 schools. And we're about the same age. He's an executive director working a $120 million business unit, 3 schools that his business has set him up for success. So the whole development of the team, the culture, the values was vastly different for me. It was hard.
How did you just said it was hard. How did you find yourself adjusting and adapting? What techniques did you use? Because I imagine as people are even just switching from one corporation to another or one organization to another, you're going to have a different culture. You're going to have a different mindset, a different approach. So being able to adapt is very, very important. That's a big adaptation you were just talking about. So what are some of the skills and techniques you use that other people could learn when they need to adapt as well?
Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've had to reset my systems. James Clear says you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fail to the level of your systems. And in the first couple of years in my service, in the first couple of years leaving service, I didn't have a recovery system. I didn't have a development system, but I had a performance system. So the 2 elements that make you perform, your recovery and your development systems, if they're not clicking, your performance is not going to excel, right? You're just not going to be able. And so what does that mean? Right? Recovery for me starts with sleep. So my performance for the next day starts with the night before sleeping, right? And it ends with the meditation at the start of my morning before I go into my workout. And that's my recovery period. And all of what I do within that space, whether it's the shower, the end of day meditation and closing and talking about the 3 things I'm grateful for today, the the music, the setting up the bed, the turning off the lights, that whole sleep hygiene, and setting the alarm to wake up at whatever time I'm supposed to wake up, which I unfortunately wake up at an ungodly hour. Um, it's I really wish I could change that, but 4:30 in the morning, I'm wide awake, right?
Mm.
And so most people start the day about 7:30, 7 o'clock, I assume, based on what I see in the traffic around here. So from 4:30 to 7, I start my, my coffee routine, my reading routine, my development routine starts.
Mhm.
And before I get into working out, which is a part of my development routine, I've read at least a chapter in a book that and this year in particular, it's been really effective. I am down, I've completed 7 books this year. And
Wait a minute, wait a minute. And just so everybody knows, we're recording this on February 10th. This episode will be out a little after that, but that means in in 41 days, you've read 7 books, Ad.
yeah, and they're not little books, right? I mean, Brene Brown's Strong Ground is not a small book.
No.
It this development system this year has just been in high gear. Now, luckily, I'm not going through the MBOE program again, so that's opened up a lot of time for me. And then I get into my workout, and that generates all of the right hormones in my system to reset my cortisol levels. Dealing with PTSD, I've got to bring my cortisol levels further down than most. And then having all that flow, and then going into the office, my performance starts with my announcement of coming into hey, good morning, guys, right? And so those endorphins are flowing from the moment that I'm working out, and I carry those into the office, and it's about bringing that joy de vivre into the office and letting them see I'm happy to be here and to serve you. So that's what I've done.
You do that every single night. You say, these are the 3 things I'm thankful for today.
Every single night.
How long have you been doing that?
Really 2.5 years now.
What got you in that habit? That's a fantastic habit.
I was finding myself in a very negative space as I was trying to figure out the values mismatch between my former military experience and JP Morgan Chase, and I was losing sight of the impact I was having on a daily basis for the, rather ethereal values mismatch concept.
So if I'm to take away from what you just told me, no, Ad, I want to know this. This is fantastic. So one of the things that's been very helpful for you is this routine that puts you in the right mind space to do what you need to do each day. And I don't think everyone's going to have the same routine that Ad has. I'm not getting up at 4:30 in the morning if I don't have to. But my routine that gets me in the right mind space, if I adhere to that routine, continue to do that routine, make that routine an expectation of essentially my own personal daily work on me, that gets me in the right mind frame to do what I need to do each day. And that will help me adapt to whatever the situation brings me that day. Am I taking that correctly from what you just told me?
It appears to be working for me and some of my closest friends.
That's fantastic.
When you are in service to other people, you have to be there for them and with them, right? And so that takes focus and presence. I don't know if you've noticed, you haven't picked up your phone once in 28 minutes. In today's world, that's quite an effort. You've probably received at least 20 emails. I know I have. It's just the way it is.
Right.
But we're engaged in this really deep dialogue and conversation, and you're asking me why, what caused you here, what took you through this, and that means I've got to give of myself to your audience and to you so they hear how they can move forward. And it's not about me. Actually, it's quite embarrassing. This is truthfully the most embarrassing and vulnerable moment I have to be, because I have to tell you, I am not as successful as what my resume appears to be. Right? I'm still a work in progress, and it takes work.
That gets back to what we were saying just at the beginning of the show, being a work in progress. That's why we all need coaching, mentorship, people to look out for us. Because the minute you think you're a completed project, that's when everything goes wrong. The
It
minute you
does.
think I know it all, because when we were all, 15, 16, we all thought we knew it all. That's when we learn we know nothing, right? Right?
That's right. That is exactly right. The moment you stop learning, that's when your life changes, and
Right.
you're really no longer living. And the studies prove that. The book I'm about to finish today is Mark Brackett's Dealing with Feelings, and it's about living your best life. And one part that is consistent in 21 different studies is learning, curiosity are the fundamental piece of living a happy life.
Thanks, Ad. Other fundamental pieces of living a happy life, for me, time with family, time with friends, and playing this short break. MoreSteam's enterprise process improvement platform includes the tools, training, and software you need to transform your organization into a problem-solving powerhouse. Join the ranks of Fortune 500 companies that trust MoreSteam for their enterprise process improvement. Visit MoreSteam.com to learn more. Also, I want to take just a moment to thank you for listening to Quality Time with MoreSteam. You can email the show at qualitytime@moresteam.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. And now back to my conversation with Ad Godinez. You mentioned it a little bit ago, going through MBOE, the Masters of Business in Operational Excellence at The Ohio State University, the Fisher College of Business. Now, on the show in the past, we've had obviously Ken Robinette's involved, MoreSteam President Peg Pennington involved. We've had Peter Ward on the show. So a lot of our listeners know a fair amount about the MBOE program. What drew you to that program? What were you hoping to accomplish? What were you hoping to learn? Tell me a little bit about your journey to MBOE.
One of the guys that I worked with while I was in the role at JP Morgan Chase, his dad was a Marine. He's just a fantastic human being. He's a professional and just got promoted to executive director. So I'm very proud of him and proud for him. But he told me, I signed up for the Operational Excellence program 3 years ago. And the reason I signed up for the MBOE is because I'd been promoted into the role of operational excellence. And so the premier organization for operational excellence was the MBOE program at OSU. So that's what drew me to it, right? Mm-hmm. I felt like do I need the credentials? I probably don't. Right? I mean,
I'm going to be honest, Ad. I looked at your LinkedIn, and I can stop about a quarter of the way through and say, this is one of the most credentialed persons I've ever met in my life. So no, you definitely didn't need the credential to have those initials after your name.
But the people who sign up for that course are the kind of people you can learn from.
Right.
And that was the most fulfilling experience I could ever, and every one of the courses I've been to. Has been like that, is the people who sign up for programs like this are the kind of people you want to be around, the kind of people you want to learn from, the kind of people you want to ask questions and engage with. And so I've learned that in the 32, 33, 34 programs now that I've been through, is that I like learning, and I like being around people who want to learn, who are curious about the world, life, and each other. I mean, at the fundamental level, we are human beings. And if we were just curious about each other, maybe there wouldn't be so much divisiveness in the world. Maybe we could just be interested in learning more about each other and understanding what drives Dan, right? Why does he get up in the morning to come to work and want to run and bring other voices to the stage to talk about what they're doing, you know?
I know exactly what you're talking about because one of the things that I have enjoyed so much about hosting the show is how much I've learned. I honestly, I feel like every 2 weeks when I get to talk to somebody like you, I'm getting an incredible education in seeing so many varied and different approaches to what we call continuous improvement and operational excellence. I've talked to people who are really digging deep into the data side and the technical side and the math side. I'm talking to people who are very much about the leadership side and the soft skills and the teaching. And I have learned so very much now that I find myself in my own day to day just talking about lean, about anything. And then they're like, Dan, where did this come from? Because 2 years ago, you weren't talking like this at all.
It, it's an experience. There is a culture here. Now, you can get to the group of people that are purists, right? And
Uh-huh.
they really focus on the tools. But if you dig into the Toyota kata, I think if you really dig into the book, right, and spend some time
Yeah.
in Katakoya, Toyota kata, you learn that it is about this repetition. If you go to the systems that James Clear is talking about, it's building the muscle memory around a very specific set of questions that it's the exact same every time. And now the team can deal not with the question that's coming because they already know. We can deal with the problem at hand, right? It's not a people or individual problem. It is a problem in the system that we've created. And that fundamental change, how can you not love an organization that works like that?
When you came in that morning and gave the presentation to Ken, you talked about some of the challenges you experienced during your time in the MBOE program and how Ken helped you through those experiences. What did you take from your experiences in the MBOE program that will help you be a better leader, a better teacher, a better coach, and also a better student when that arrives as well?
I'm glad you finished with the student piece. And, I'm probably jumping into this a little quicker without thinking longer. So forgive me for that. Um, but the thing that Ken taught me that I tried to solve a problem nobody cared about with my
Mm.
MBOE lean black belt program. It's an important problem set. It is no kidding, probably 20 to $30 million problem set in the organization I'm working in. It is a big problem set, but no one cared about it. And what Ken taught me is about the wrong timing in the program, right? When I'm midway into finding the data for my problem set, he says he just it really works if you find a problem they're interested
Mm.
in, and so being a better student starts with asking questions. What are the problems that you're really dealing with on a daily basis? And teaching through questioning, you know, what are real problems that okay, let's go dig and see what the data tells us about this. Now let's go see what are good problem sets to work on. So understanding, seeking to understand, questioning, and listening to understand. Um, that's probably the single most important life lesson and leadership lesson I took away from Ken's mentorship. Use a problem they're interested in. Now, the teaching, coaching, mentoring piece of it, use that problem to build a foundation around lean practices and lean thinking. Right. And just don't worry about the A3.
Right.
Build something that serves the group of people that you're working with where they are. Serves the people you're working with where they are. And you're not going to get there if you don't be a student of who they are. And so those two elements together are the yin and yang of this, right? They're always in touch. They're always touching if you're questioning, supporting, questioning, supporting. And so I think what Ken reinforced for me was being really curious about the person and their problem set is where you really, that's kind of the nexus of exploding into the next phase of this.
One of the things that really struck me about your presentation to Ken that morning was the authenticity of it all. It seemed very authentic. It seems very real because it was. Sometimes when you're dealing with a teacher or a coach, and especially as you're getting at that piece of, I've got to be interested in you, I've got to be interested in your problem, you can sometimes tell there is an inauthenticity there, that I'm only showing that I'm interested, but I'm not really, I'm going through the motions almost. How do you deal with that when you see that? Because I'm sure you've come across that. I think we all have, right?
This is not always the most comfortable topic, right? And there are moments that are transactional.
Right.
And inauthenticity does a disservice to the people you're working for.
Absolutely.
And in leadership, if you're not there in service of the people that are working with you, and notice the words I use, these are very deliberate for me. Mm-hmm. Nobody has ever worked for me. I work for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's a true leadership mindset. That's a true leadership mindset.
That's what my institutions have taught me. Yes.
Right.
Notice, again, deflecting it back to
humble leader. We talked about it. Yes.
You can't build that into someone else. You can't. There are leaders that are very good at what they do, and they will consume people, energy, and resources to get to their agenda, and that's necessary in some spaces. There are moments where that's absolutely essential, and they are far and few between. I think one of the most important memories that I have, we were ambushed outside of a small town in Iraq called Diwania. One of our gunners took a round, went in here, came out his cheek, Jerry G. And my platoon leader, Mark Bargaloff, God, he was such a great young man. He is such a great man. Mark lost it for a second, and I'm an empathetic leader. It is my go-to place, but that's not what Mark needed in that moment. He needed clear direction, a little control back into his space to reassert authority over his platoon. And so in the middle of what was happening, I went there to where the problem was, engaged with Mark, explained that his whole platoon needed him, not just Jerry, and that we would get Jerry out. It was a moment of direct leadership, not my favorite type of leadership in a world that we have today, and rarely needed. But that was a crisis moment that needed direct intervention. In that same moment, a brigade commander, senior officer in the organization, I was a young captain, came over and he was trying to be empathetic with me. And he said, Captain Godinez, is your unit prepared to go back into combat? Way beyond my rank and pay, I responded with, sir, I don't need you here right now. Get the F off my objective. We're going back into battle, and we're going to take anybody out that we need to because Jerry deserves that. Do you need anything else from me, sir? And I was curt and inappropriate and probably should have been shanghaied for it. But he didn't understand the situation, right? My men needed to get re-engaged to get back on the horse from the moment that we were in. Otherwise, we would never re-engage over the next 8 months. And that moment deserved the kind of leadership that was necessary. Other moments, there are very few moments like that. We don't need a lot of leaders that do that. We need more leaders that are building up.
What is a time recently when you've had that opportunity to build someone up? You've got SOI Solutions, and I want to talk a little bit more of that. But in your last few weeks, last few months, when is an opportunity you've had with the experiences you've had, with the knowledge you've had, to be able to build someone up? When have you done that recently? Tell me about that.
So actually, again, I can't believe you asked this question because I was just talking to her today. I have a senior operational manager in this organization that I'm mentoring. And she is one of the two ICs in the organization, second in command, second in leadership role. And she runs half of the division, the organization that I'm coaching. And she is guiding probably one of the more complex transformational changes in the organization, creating a ridership tracking system that brings in people for which she has no direct authority, fiat authority over. And she's never done this before. Mm-hmm. She's only worked in her organization. Very siloed piece of approach that we do to developing people in most of our organizations, right? And she's been given this complex problem to solve. And I told her, I'm your secretary. I will build whatever products you need to serve whatever you need to get done. I will build it. I will coach you. We will work through every question you have, but we have to have an open dialogue. So 4 or 5 weeks ago, she was going to quit. She's like, I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. And I'm like, yep, you are. I understand that. What can I do? What do you need right now from me to create the space to take just the next step? Don't worry about the rest. We'll get there, like Ken did for me. What's the next step? Do you need this, this, and this? No, I need time. Okay. Well, let's go for a walk.
Right. Just sometimes you just need to clear your head, right?
One of my best leaders when we would deal with big problems at the UCOM, U.S. European Command, he would go for a 3-4 mile run out in the woods in Germany. He would clear his head and then he'd come back. She cleared her head, went home. Tuesday was the next business day that we would work together. Wednesday, the meeting came. She did a phenomenal job. Nervous, you could tell how nervous she was. Yesterday, she was the first person to put out an executive summary for the meeting that she'd last run, do outs, who's responsible, using a system very similar to what Evan just described in your last podcast. Mm-hmm. Right? Who's responsible, timeline. And I asked her, and she said, what did you think? And I said, well, what did you think? I can do this. I was going to quit 5 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
I can do this.
That's great. Ad, I'm looking at my prepared questions, and I had 15, and we've gotten through 4.
I'm sorry.
No, this has been absolutely fantastic. I appreciate this conversation so much. My first question is, because I've got so many more questions, and I haven't even touched on, for example, your time at the Office of National Drug Control Policy. I haven't talked about some of your posts on LinkedIn about AI and networking. Only touched upon some of your military experiences. So my first question is, will you please come back and join the show again? This conversation, there are times where I am rarely speechless, and I don't think I've ever been speechless on the show, but there were times where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say next. This has just been, what you have said is so powerful and moving and inspirational. So will you come back and join us again? First question.
Of course, I'm in service, right? That's what my nation asked me to do. I'm in service.
Well, on that level, I fall far below the nation, but I appreciate you willing to come back to the show. You know, I know I'm way down that list, but thank you.
I don't think like that. I think you're serving everybody else that's interested in learning about how to do one thing better. Everybody that's out here running a podcast that is teaching, coaching, mentoring, giving a little insight how to do, and then connecting you to someone to do it, right? That's in service.
I have to say now, the next time somebody asks you, when did you build someone up? You could say, Dan, at the end of that podcast, I just built him up. Because I feel ready to take on the world. Thank you, Ad.
That's what we do.
So I'm so glad you'll come back, and I am most certainly going to schedule you again in the future. Second question, I'm not going to let you leave without telling us about SOI Solutions. So please, can you tell us about SOI Solutions, what it is you do, and also tell me the incredible story behind the name that we talked about a couple weeks ago?
So SOI Solutions, Eileen and I were trying to figure out, what do we want to do in the next chapter of our lives?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't share that part with you. And so when we were thinking about what our company name should be and how we should be in service to others, Eileen, she retired first and started her company first. I was working for JP Chase. And so her company's name is Thought Partners. She wants to be your thought partner working through a problem. I look at the world a little bit differently, which is normal. And SOI Solutions, you use the spheres of influence around you to help plug the gaps in your problem-solving process, right? I think the individuals that I work with know most of the problems that they're really dealing with. They need someone to help them through the next steps. And with my spheres of influence and the people I know in my network, it's not just me that you're getting with SOI Solutions. You get my entire network to come and help you. And so spheres of influence was a concept that I learned about in Iraq back in 2003 when we were talking about Mark Bargaloff and Jerry G, who is still alive. He did make it. And so what we do is, like I said, I jump in the foxhole with you and work with you to really create the systems changes that you need to create a sustainable system of change that can sustain itself, build itself, and I can come back and touch anytime you need me. And that's what we're trying to do with SOI Solutions, or what I'm trying to do with SOI Solutions. That's it in a nutshell. It's just, I've got a lot of experience. I've made a lot of mistakes.
You've made some mistakes, as we all have, but judging by what I know about you, judging about our time here today, you've also done quite a few things right. You've done a lot of things right, Ad, to get you to this point here today. And you've done a lot of things right during this conversation, because this has just been truly phenomenal. I cannot say enough. And I appreciate your service. I appreciate your service to others that continues to this day. I I appreciate the stories that you shared. I appreciate that you were willing to share of yourself during our conversation here, and willing to share of yourself when you came that cold January morning to give that presentation to Ken. I knew from that moment and from our brief discussion afterwards that this was a conversation I needed to have on this show and that people needed to hear on this show. So thank you so much, Ad. I will, of course, include your LinkedIn in the show notes, a link to SOI Solutions in the show notes. And I am going to hold you to it because I've got pages of questions still to ask, and we have not even gotten to most of them.
Well, I'll talk less next time. I'll try to be more
I'm not going to let you talk less. I'm not going to let you talk less. I'll just stretch it out and ask you to come back again.
Hey, look, to be honest with you, it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to be in support of what you guys are doing at MoreSteam. I have the utmost respect for everyone in that building, on your team, in Powell. I think the world of Peg. And the way that she coaches and mentors and grows others everywhere around her. You know how I feel about Ken. I shared that with you and the team. And, that energy that you guys have to create change and sustainable change in organizations is really people-centric. And it's easy to be in support of people like that.
Ad Godinez, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, have a great day on purpose, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Quality Time with MoreSteam. Thanks again.